Today, I'm going to talk about the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, also known as the HPA axis. You probably heard about it before, and the reason why I want to talk about it is because I mention it a lot in my videos, and I get questions, what is the HPA axis? In today's video, you're going to be equipped to know what the HPA axis is and what I'm talking about. Let's get into it. It's Mondays with Mihaela. That's right, me. Thank you so much for following, subscribing, liking the videos. I love and appreciate your support. Well, today's topic is about the HPA axis. And the reason why I want to talk about this today is because I love stress. I absolutely love stress because I know what it does to the body, but I also know what can be done to avoid it or to minimize the side effects of it or to even remove the side effects of it. So this is why today's video is going to be all about the HPA axis. I'm going to drill deep into the detail about what it is and how it functions. Okay, and like I said, the reason is because I absolutely love stress. Let's get into it. So the HPA axis is an important hormonal response system that is vital for our life. We would not be alive right now if we did not have our HPA axis functioning. It is absolutely key. And you know, the HPA axis actually is dependent on our genes, our early life environment, our current environment, and also stresses around us. And it keeps us alive. How does it do that? As the HPA axis starts off with the hypothalamus, it goes into the pituitary gland, and then it goes into the adrenal glands. So it goes boom, boom, boom. So what is the hypothalamus? The hypothalamus is a small region located at the base of our brain, and it's near the pituitary gland. And this hypothalamus gland is the size of an almond. So imagine the size of an almond, about that big. That's how big our hypothalamus is. But it is absolutely responsible for so many vital things in our body. Its main thing is to ensure that we have balance, homeostasis within our body by controlling it, by controlling a number of aspects. So it controls heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, body weight, appetite, sleep cycle, and the list goes on. But do you know what? The main thing that it also does is it releases hormones, its primary hormones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to list off the hormones that it is responsible for. The list goes on. It's crazy. So here we go. The antidiuretic hormones, corticotropin releasing hormone, gonadotropin releasing hormone, growth hormone releasing and inhibiting hormone, oxytocin, prolactin releasing and inhibiting hormone, thyrotropin releasing hormone. So with all of these hormones that the hypothalamus is responsible for, we can see how vital it is for our function as it maintains our homeostasis. So what it does is it produces these hormones which stop and start the production of other hormones. So those hormones that I mentioned, the primary ones, they start or stop the production of other hormones. So what happens is, so we've got the hypothalamus and the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, which I spoke about, and then it goes into the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland does absolute wonders, and it is tiny. It's next to the hypothalamus, and the reason why it's next to the hypothalamus is because they work hand in hand together. The pituitary gland is a pea size. It is absolutely tiny, and there's two parts to it: the anterior and the posterior, so the front and the back, and they both do different things. So I'm going to go into them after I explain a bit more about it. So there's two parts, the anterior and the posterior. The anterior produces and releases hormones such as adrenocorticotropic hormones, which is ACTH, which I talk about a lot, Cortisol stimulating hormones, FSH, growth hormone, luteinizing hormone, prolactin, and also thyroid stimulating hormone. Does so much, and it's vital for our function. So the two hormones that are produced by the hypothalamus and stored in the posterior pituitary gland before being secreted into the bloodstream are oxytocin and antidiuretic hormones. So these are the two that are produced by the hypothalamus, which I spoke about, and then they're stored into the posterior, not the anterior, pituitary gland. And it controls the thyroid glands, adrenal glands, ovaries, and testes. So that is what the pituitary gland main functions are. So what did I say? So it talks about thyroid, adrenal glands, ovaries, and testes. So this is why it's key, because I always blab on about stress impacting our reproductive system, our adrenals, and our thyroid. And this is what the pituitary gland's main area of expertise is, if you want to put it that way. So what happens essentially, so let's go back into the hypothalamus, sends a signal to the pituitary gland to release or inhibit pituitary hormone production. Okay, so the pituitary acts after the hypothalamus promotes it. So the boss is the hypothalamus. Pituitary gland's like, okay, boss, I'll get that pumping. And then what happens? We get into the adrenals. Favorite part are the adrenals. Absolutely love them. So adrenals are a rectangular shaped organs just above our kidneys. So we have two of them, one here and one here. So they sit up top of our kidneys, and they're made up of the cortex and the medulla. So you have the cortex, which is responsible for the CSH hormones, the glucocorticoids, and the mineral corticoids. And then you have the medulla, which is responsible for epinephrine, which is also known as adrenaline, and norepinephrine, which is also known as noradrenaline. But the main thing that I do usually talk about is the cortex. So we'll go back to that. So like I said, the cortex is responsible for the corticosteroids and glucocorticosteroids, which is included is cortisol, which I always talk about how cortisol gets excreted. So I've mentioned a lot of words, a lot of long words, which I probably can't even pronounce properly. But how does all of this fit in? Let's simplify it and get into the detail. So what happens is, let's say you're a business professional, you have your own business, and you're on a tight timeline, you have to pump out this project. So what happens is you have this tight deadline, which is your stressor. Your stressor is your tight deadline. So in this case, it's not perceived, it's real. Well, we believe so. But what needs to be noted, a stressor can be perceived or not real. So what that means is anything that we make up in our head also has this flow-on effect. Okay, so real or perceived, both of them do the same thing biochemically in our body. Okay, and then what happens is this stressors, there's this timelines here, you're like, I've got to pump this out for the client. And then what happens is our hypothalamus gets into activation. That small region at the base of our brain, which I spoke about, which is the almond size, gets into activation. And what that does is it releases CRH, which is then sent to the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland goes, yes, boss, what would you like me to do? The pituitary gland then releases ACTH. Okay, so you've got the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and now we get into our adrenals. Our adrenal glands get activated from that stressor of a tight deadline, and cortisol is produced by the cortex of the adrenal glands, which is the response to a stressor. So we have our stressor, which is a tight deadline, hypothalamus secreting a hormone, a pituitary gland secreting a hormone to our adrenals, and adrenal goes, here's cortisol throughout our body. We all know, and I have spoken about many times, what cortisol does to our body, which puts us into that activation mode, like we've got to get stuff happening away from our digestion, into our muscles, and in our everything dilates, our blood vessels dilate, our pupils dilate, we're just pumped, ready to go, because at this stage we're ready to run. But at this stage we just have a tight deadline, so we're not ready to run. So it's about the deadline that you're stressed about. So next time that you're stressed about something, you know now exactly what happens to your biochemistry, if it is a perceived stress or if it is an actual stressor. The biochemistry in our body does exactly the same thing. So always want to talk about the HPA axis. I'm talking about the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenals, and the stimulation that happens from a stressor. Thank you so much for listening. Have you learned anything? Let me know. Type a yes in the comments below if you've learned something. Share, like, love, do whatever it is that you do best. I appreciate and love your support. Until next Monday, love you.